Hey everybody, let's talk about Bob Seger. Bob Seger being one of those artists in my collection that I definitely never thought I'd own more than one of. But his stuff was readily available early on, so I grabbed like the usual kind of classic albums you think of when you think of Bob Seger. But the more I dove into him, particularly his beginnings, the more I got interested in him, and the more I started to love, especially that early stuff. So I'll talk about what I own, which isn't a lot, and what I learned, which also isn't a lot. But I find the guy pretty fascinating. Again, especially that early sound. The guy is born in '45, born in Detroit, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Singer-Songwriter Hall of Fame, Grammy winner, if that stuff matters to you. 6 decades worth of music. His early stuff, like I said, is different. It's psych rock, garage rock. It's exactly the stuff I kind of love, and I felt pretty hard when I found out about that early stuff. He's growing up in an era of Motown. He's growing up in an era of singles and quick music that gets people up and dancing. And I think he marries a lot of genres together throughout his career. I think he's very successful at doing that. First band he starts in high school, like every great rock star. It's called the Decibels, which I think is one of the best band names out there, especially for a high school rock band. He goes into a band called the Town Criers. In '65, he goes into a band called Doug Brown and the Omens. Meets a guy named Punch Andrews, Punch for short, who becomes his kind of lifelong friend and producer. So they're always working together. Punch says to him, "Hey, I need you to do a song for this other band out of Grosse Pointe, Michigan, called the Underdogs." So Bob Seger writes a song, records it, and they're like, the hell with it. I want to release your stuff. You put this song out. So on Hideout Records, which was Punch Andrews' label at the time, they put out the single. The single started to get picked up and put out by Cameo Parkway, which was another label at the time. And Cameo puts out the singles. And the single East Side Story was the one that he wrote for the Underdogs. That was a major one. A few others come out. And then the biggest one, most popular one, was probably Heavy Music, which I think Heavy Music came out in '66. So what I found when I started collecting records was that in 2018 there was this reissue of all that stuff from early Bob Seger when he was releasing those singles under Cameo Parkway. The label eventually goes under, but at least they still had all the recordings, obviously, and they put them all together in this comp from Third Man Records, which I think is super cool because they pressed it there in Detroit, and that's Jack White's home, right? Jack White, Detroit, Bob Seger, Detroit. You get the theme here. So super cool to have this. East Side Story, like I said, was my favorite off this one. If you go into YouTube, and you are on YouTube, Bob Seger and the Last Heard, East Side Story, you'll find a awesome like black and white clip from this old '60s show called Swing Time where they perform it. I don't know if he's lip singing or not. I don't care. It's freaking fantastic, and it's the reason why I got this album. Heavy Music being the other major single. So Bob Seger and the Last Heard, check out that stuff. Get this album actually, but definitely you can find that black and white video. It's pretty cool to see what Bob Seger was all about in the very early days. So they get signed on to Cameo Parkway. Cameo Parkway goes under, then Capitol Records comes into the picture, and when Capitol Records comes in, the name switches from The Last Heard to the Bob Seger System. He puts out 3 albums with the Bob Seger System, and the first one of which is kind of considered Bob Seger's first studio album, and that is, the Bob Seger System. This is January 1969, and there's definitely some awesome late '60s vibes on this. Very psych-heavy stuff, lots of heavy bass lines. The song White Wall is so like great psych song. Rambling Gambling Man is the big hit off of this, and it's definitely just a song I'll always want to listen to. Train Man, Black Eyed Girl was a song I didn't even want to see end. This is a 1980 Canadian reissue. This has quickly become my favorite Bob Seger piece that I own, hands down. I'll probably try to source out an original at some point of this. But yeah, so that's the first from the Bob Seger System. They would go on to the next one called Noah, which is really hard to find. I don't think it's been reissued at all. This is an original Canadian of it. Some people believe that it hasn't been reissued because Bob doesn't want it reissued because Capitol Records brings in this guy named Tom Nemi to be kind of a co-lead in the band. Didn't go over so well. Bob leaves the system, comes back. Tom leaves, gets fired, I don't know. And they do a third one, which I don't have. I don't know a lot about the Noah album, or I shouldn't say that. I've listened to it. Doesn't really strike me the same way the first album does, and I haven't heard the third album by the System yet, but I will try to own that for sure. So that's the three of the Bob Seger System. Then he goes on to do, I think, 5 more records under kind of his own name, none of which I own, which is a shame. There's one called, I think it's a Beautiful Yellow Cover, back in '72. I think that's the one with Turn the Page on it. I'll probably try to acquire that one pretty quick here. So yeah, 3 albums with the System, 5 albums under his own name, and then we get into the era that most of us are kind of familiar with when it comes to Bob Seger, and that is Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band. So now we're entering kind of themes about, like maturity, rites of passage, like desperation, and then also just good old rock and roll vibes, like, old time rock and roll, those kinds of songs, which is great, right? When I think of Bob Seger, I think, especially when it comes to the Silver Bullet Band, I feel like I'm transported to some kind of dive bar on the outskirts of Detroit where the place is packed and full and this band's on stage and they're just killing it and everyone's loving it. So that's the vibe I get from Bob Seger, even the earlier stuff too, right? Like just a good time music. Again, he's coming out of the Motown era where everyone was up and dancing and excited about music. And I think, like I said, he really marries a lot of different genres together very well throughout his career. So he goes from psych, garage rocky kind of stuff, and now he's into the Silver Bullet Band, and we would qualify this as more of like a heartland rock sort of vibe, right? I get a lot of feelings that he's drawing from his past with this stuff. I don't know if that's true or not, but it definitely, for me, it kind of fuels a very nostalgia-heavy vibe when I listen to his music, and maybe that's just me, but there's a lot of soulfulness, there's a lot of grittiness into his music. It's very earnest, and again, the Motown vibe that he grew up with, I think he transfers that into these albums really well, usually in the way of background singers. Anyway, I'm rambling. Not gambling. Rambling about Bob Seger, and this is his first one with the Silver Bullet Band. This is released in October '76. This is Night Moves. So this is technically his 9th studio album, recorded in Alabama, Michigan, and Toronto. The Alabama thing is important to mention because on the 3 albums I'm going to show you here from the Silver Bullet Band, each of the albums is almost split down the middle with the Silver Bullet Band doing the backing and then the Muscle Shoals rhythm section doing the backing. So Muscle Shoals, Alabama, has a group of musicians. They're session musicians. They actually went through a couple iterations and a couple variations of who was in that session group. Nonetheless, it provides a slightly different vibe than the Silver Bullet Band, but somehow I think it all works together on each of the albums. The Muscle Shoals rhythm section, though, super popular group, maybe 500 plus recordings I thought I heard that they were contributing on for various artists over the time. So super interesting to see that he had kept that long-standing relationship with those guys, in addition to his own band, right? So again, Night Moves, obviously the biggest hit off this being the title track. Incredible stuff. My favorite song on the album for sure. There's a song called Sunburst on here. It was a deeper cut for me that I liked a lot. Kind of heavy rock riffs in it. Super great. Main Street's on here. Ship of Fools, Mary Lou. Everyone knows that one as well. Anyway, so October '76, Night Moves. This is an original Canadian pressing, mastered by Wally Truggut. I think actually they all are. I'm not sure if he always worked with Wally or not, but a great mastering engineer if that was something you're interested in. So, and then we get into the very next album. So that was '76, and this is May '78, and this has a lot of big hits on it too. So this is Stranger in Town. This is the one with Hollywood Nights, Old Time Rock and Roll, still the same, incredible stuff. And again, throwback to the Motown stuff with the background singers, just bringing, maybe not a Motown vibe, but like an R&B vibe to the music. And the background singer on that song, one of them is Vanetta Fields. And Vanetta Fields, if you didn't know, was just one of those background vocalists that was on just hundreds of different albums, hundreds of different songs at least, right? So very popular vocalist. And this album definitely shines because of her. The song We've Got Tonight is on here. Now that's an emotional, an emotive song for sure. Great song. What else can I say about this? Not much. Great album. I think Night Moves kind of takes it for me, but this one I think was regarded as one of his first standout albums for sure. So that's album number 10. Then album number 11 from Bob Seger is the one that most people are familiar with, of course, because of the title track. and that is Against the Wind. So this is February 1980. This is the 11th studio album by Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band. Again, half the album with Silver Bullet, half with Muscle Shoals. And yeah, obviously the title track is the big hit on here. Fire Lake was pretty popular too because there was a lot of collaboration with members of the Eagles on this. Yeah, great stuff. Not much more to say about this album. It's not the one I go to the most. This is an original Canadian pressing though. Again, another one mastered by Wally. Sounds good. But yeah, that's it. I just really wanted to share the little I knew about Bob Seger. I encourage you to dig deep into the earlier stuff because those last 3 albums, everyone's probably pretty familiar with that stuff. But get into the Bob Seger system. Source out some material from the last herd to hear a different side of this guy. You know, his whole career seems like a real grinding type of guy. He's very gritty. He's very soulful. He's got a lot of depth to his lyrics, but they're also very short songs. Right? It's definitely a different kind of rock that I'm used to. There's not a lot of extended jams, not a lot of solos. Just to the point, great solid music. So that's it. Thanks for stopping by. Spin it often. Spin it loud. See you in the next one.